again, not again. Cats sometimes. They keep licking themselves, they lick off some of their old fur, but they insist that they want to eat it. And if you try to get it off them, they're going to run away and make sure like, no, I want to munch on this. I think it's a conspiracy theory. They want me to clean up their hairballs after they get sick. Hey, you did it again. You can't really win sometimes. Anyways, welcome to another edition of the Wandering Yuki Cheese Cafe, your one-stop shop for everything musical, rental-related, cooking, grilling, microbrews, all in one package. You may laugh, you may cry, you may be confused, you may want to lock me up in a padded cell, and if I've done my job properly, then you're going to feel all of the above. So before I continue, yep, pretty good idea, be sure to hit the subscribe button below because I'm always making new content. So if you've known me for years, and you've probably been following me for a while now, you know I'm a huge music fan, and I try to put these other musical references in all my videos, new and old and whatever I can, just as long as I don't get hit with a copyright claim. Yeah, YouTube, please be nice to me, alright? And seeing how this is like the 1 year anniversary since I started this channel on YouTube, I thought, let's do a little something special for everybody. Why don't we just show off some goodies in my music collection? I know I probably hinted at it in the past, so I'll put a link to the top right corner of my last video where I referenced it. And we're going to take a little guided tour and give you an idea of where my musical sensibilities have come from. But first, if I'm going to be going musical, I should get an appropriate brew for that. Let's tackle this sucker. There we are. Yeah, I had to get a beer glass, and I have a beer that I've been keeping aside just for such an occasion. So, if you remember my Beer 101 video from the past, you probably remember that ambers are probably not my thing. Mostly because ambers are made with caramelized malts as opposed to regular malts. So it's kind of like when you do caramelized onions in your cooking. When you cook them up and you brown them up or you get them orange, they are going to come a little bit sweeter. And I'm not a really big fan of super sweet stuff. It's kind of like me with wine, which I should probably cover in a future episode. But because I have this one here, I figured it's the perfect one to do for a musical reference. I got one from Farnham, and it's going to be called, never mind the bitter, here's the extra bitter. So, just in case you're not musically inclined, you're wondering, where does this come from? Simple enough. It comes from the very first album by the Sex Pistols. Actually, I think they only had one album, but yeah, the Sex Pistols came from the first wave of punk bands in the late 70s. I guess it was supposed to be like a reaction to all the overblown arena rock from the mid-70s. I thought, you know what? We got to bring rock back to its roots. So I guess this is their idea for it. And I've never tried this one before. And I'll admit, I've just been saving this for such an occasion. So I'm going to give this one a good taste. So if I'm looking at this, it's definitely an amber / pale ale. But the big question is going to be, how bitter is it going to be? Now let's go for the Spinal Tap reference. How much more bitter can it be? They'd say none. None more bitter. Am I right? I guess I'm going to give this thing a taste. Okay. And just in time, I had one cat that had to meow at me too. Right, big buddy? Okay. Not too bad. It's bitter, but not bitter that's insufferable, so I can definitely drink that. And something that does help, it's 4.8%. Can't really complain. So on that note, let's get taking a look. Let's take a look. Let's get taking a look is not proper English. I don't want to have the situation where I go, me fail English? That's impossible. Super delicious. Yeah, this amber is pretty bitter, And any of you who know me know I like to call my Ambers redheads, so this is a bitter redhead. Why is it bitter? Well, I think she went through a really bad breakup and she's still in rebound mode. I mean, if you're in rebound mode, you could do some crazy things. But, bad jokes aside, you're looking at my CD wall over here. So just to give you an idea of what's been going on, I was a music fan since I was a kid, but it was really only when I got into CEGEP, or I guess college as you would say outside of Quebec. And somehow that's when I got my musical sensibilities put into place. So I started collecting, and this is like maybe around close to 18 years worth of collecting that was done over here. And in case you're wondering what my style is, well, how can I put this? I'm all over the map. I like my classic rock, I like my R&B, I like soul, some metal, even some of the newer stuff too. I used to think that, you had to have certain types of lyrics that actually have a meaning, some complexities with the music, and just a whole bunch of snobbish attitudes. But as I got older, I thought, you know what am I getting so picky about? I'm gonna listen to, let's say, Justin Timberlake, and still enjoy it for its terms, versus same thing as if you listen to David Bowie or Pink Floyd. Good music, but for very different reasons. And yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. And I thought with this big wall over here, I could showcase a few of my highlights. I wouldn't be doing much justice to music if I didn't bring up the Beatles, because if you're around the time, they did a lot for popular music at that point, and are still pretty influential to this day, like some pretty huge fans. In terms of the albums that I got, I know I have this one here. Let me see if I can get it up. There you go. Abbey Road, released in 1969. And yep, I have this one on a t-shirt too, because I mean that the Crossroad in England, and especially this t-shirt, is such an iconic image that everyone's probably has seen it before. And I'm sure it's a good tourist area where if you're walking by this particular crosswalk, you're gonna be imitating the album art anyways. But funny fact too, Let It Be came out in 1970, but that was from a previous project before this came out. 1969 was when the Beatles had recorded their last album as a group. So while Let It Be came out around the time they were breaking up, this is the last one they did together. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, all this stuff that you have over here, how do you only have one Beatles album? Well, the truth is, this is the only one that I have standalone. Because the other one I got, and I probably highlighted this a while back, is The Beatles in Mono. Some of you who probably never heard of Mono, I'm going to give you a bit of a background. In the old days, like I'm going to say 1968, 1967, all music at the time was recorded in mono sound, because you would be under the impression that most of your systems would have come out through one speaker. But then as time went on, they realized the technology was there and recording techniques had changed. They would create stereo sound. So you have like one set of sounds coming from the left, and then one set coming from the right, which is all well and good. Only issue is that a lot of the older records too were re-released on stereo sound. Doesn't sound that bad, but imagine this. Mono, you got a pretty good sound coming from one ear, and then the same sound from the other ear if you're listening on headphones. Stereo sound, if it was especially done in mono back in the old days, when it was remixed, it was very weird what they had done. It's like, you could hear maybe the vocals and the bass in one ear, and then you could hear the guitars and the drums in the other ear. Very strange indeed. And if you're trying to share your headphones with someone else on the bus ride, like if you're in school, or let's say you're with your girlfriend and you want to say, hey, listen to the Beatles, it would be very strange. You would hear half the music, and then the other person would hear the other half. I don't know. It's a very bizarre thing that they had done. But yeah, when I heard that the Beatles were remastering their catalog for CD, because I had the original CD versions coming out in the late 80s, and it was only like around 2009 when they finally remastered it. Like changed the sound to make it more clear, clean up the music, just make it a bit easier to listen to. And when I heard this came out, this was like a no-brainer for me. I had to buy it. And the cool thing too is that a lot of these have these slipcases here that replicate the original vinyl. That was like a pretty cool collectible that I had back in 2009. That's the kind of fan that I am. But then, Beatles were like one of my first loves when I was a kid, when I heard it either in my parents' car or if I was listening to some Beatles records I borrowed from my aunt. In case you wanted to know what was the start of my journey, well, that's an interesting one. In terms of the start of my journey when I was in CEGEP, it was back around that time that I kind of was somewhere in between. I probably liked pop music during my high school days, but given how I was lacking in confidence at the time, I would not have admitted to anyone. But I kind of liked the older stuff too. It was in the CEGEP years that one of my other buddies had told me about Led Zeppelin. You know, he said, "Have you ever heard Stairway to Heaven before?" I told him no, and he said, "Dude, you gotta check it out." And I always like to say that was the start of my journey. Because to give you an idea, in case you haven't heard Led Zeppelin before, well, just Google a few of them and then you'll thank me later. But Stairway to Heaven, it just struck me as really odd at the time. Because I always knew these pop songs that was like verse, chorus, solo, chorus, and then an outro. But Stairway to Heaven was an 8-minute song. It didn't really have a set chorus or a set verse. And you only really heard an acoustic guitar with electric guitar during the first half of the song. The rest of the band only came in like somewhere in the latter half of it, and it really built up to a crescendo, and I thought, holy crap, you can actually write music like this? And it kind of set me on the stage. From there I discovered Jimi Hendrix, rediscovered my love of the Beatles, some of the Rolling Stones, and etc. And of course I had to get some Led Zeppelin in my collection. So there's 2 Zeppelin things that I have here, interestingly enough. There's this Led Zeppelin box set that came out around 1990. And yeah, this seems kind of weird to think, what the heck is this? Well, you have to remember that 1990, a lot of people were still holding on to their vinyl collections, and they probably still had it on their shelves. Some CD boxes were boxed up like this so that if you were to put it on the shelf with your vinyl, the size here was around the same size as a record. It was one of those that they probably took a whole bunch of songs from the original albums, just rearranged them, regrouped them. I don't know what the logic was in it, but sometimes it had some rarities too. But essentially, this thing is like around 4 CDs worth of stuff. So if you're like me and you're trying to get into the group, this is a good way to go. But years later, I went for, let's get this out of the way. Years later, what I went for was another box set. So yeah, I ended up buying 2 Led Zeppelin box sets. But it was this sucker over here, the complete studio recordings. So what this one has is all the albums that they had released around their career. But this was the first time when I was listening to a lot of them, I heard all the songs in the context. So if you've been listening to Shown, or listen to a lot of classic rock stations, you probably know Black Dog, Rock and Roll, The Battle of Evermore, and Stairway to Heaven. So you probably heard those every now and then. But those songs in that order was side 1 of Led Zeppelin's Untitled 4th album. Yeah, this is a small picture, but you get the idea. The Untitled 4th album is just, you know, kind of called Led Zeppelin 4 or Zoso based on the images. Call it what you want. So hearing a lot of these in the context, it brought a whole new style to the records. And I've been kind of a fan since. A lot of good stuff there. And to think that critics hated them also back in the day. And yet somehow they had a huge following, they sold a lot. A band like that cannot survive these days. Because it's like, okay, your first album is a flop, you're not going to go on. We're eliminating your contract. Seems like it's very hard to break into music these days, I guess. But that's a rant for another time. So with all these albums that I got on the shelf, there's bound to be some stuff that's going to be some oddities, some weird stuff. So I guess the funniest trivia is like, what is the weirdest band name that you ever heard of? I guess if you remember one of my previous videos, one of those was the name Butthole Surfers. Yeah, once again, if you walk away from this video knowing anything, it's that there is a band out there called the Butthole Surfers. Who knows what it's about? And frankly, I don't want to know how they came up with it. All knows it was a bunch of guys from Texas on LSD, and that's really all you need to know about them. They're heavy, they're punkish, they're very trippy, and it's like, well, this one over here, Locust Abortion Technician, you put a few minutes of this on and you think, what the heck am I listening to? Yeah. Full disclosure, I have a tendency to listen to some very weird stuff. And In terms of other weirdness, this is another one that takes the cake. If I go right here, yep, Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask replica. Yeah, this is one of the most bizarre albums I've ever heard. I know that Matt Groening, one of the co-creators of The Simpsons, is a fan of this one, but yeah, it's not for everyone. It's like very all over the place, very trippy, very, well, you kind of think they were on some kind of drugs at the time. And yeah, and it's also like at least 60 minutes. I've actually sat through all 60 minutes of that. But on the other hand, considering that Captain Beefheart was a friend of Frank Zappa's, you kind of expect him to be just as weird as Frank. But I guess the big difference between him and Frank is that his stuff was very primitive, very primal. Frank Zappa, for as weird as he was actually very compositional. He actually had a lot of... He was a pretty good composer for what he did, so people don't really see that. So, actually I found something over here. Here. One of my favorite albums of all time of his was actually my first introduction to Frank Zappa. The album Hot Rats. Yeah. What do you think of when you think of Frank Zappa? 9 times out of 10 you're probably thinking Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, or when he was challenging Congress in the United States over the whole censorship thing in music in the 80s. Like, this guy was really against that, but this is going into political territory I don't want to talk about. Still, there's some good stuff on here. If you like jazz, you probably would listen to this without knowing who he is and think, this is good stuff. And then you hear it's Frank Zappa, it's like, holy crap, that's him? Pretty amazing. The guy was another genius, if a bit of a mad genius, I have to say. And thinking back to Led Zeppelin, Zeppelin was like one of those bands that you would consider like the big three in hard rock in Britain in the 70s. So the other ones you would think about are Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. Anyone who doesn't know much about Deep Purple, well, let me give you a little tutorial on that. If there's one album of theirs that you probably know, or one song, it's off the album Machine Head. And you probably know the song Smoke on the Water. You know, da 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 da. Yeah. If you're ever learning guitar and you're trying to learn a riff, Smoke on the Water is one of those that you're going to be learning, you know, like one of your first riffs. But here's a cool one too that's like a little bit of personal trivia. Deep Purple in rock. The Mark II lineup of Deep Purple is supposed to be a parody of Mount Rushmore. Pretty neat stuff where they started to become a really hard band. And I kind of like this because I remember looking through my dad's old record collection. This is the one that he actually had on hand too. It's another case of if I was able to talk to him about music, what would he think? What can I share with the guy? And that's Deep Purple. I've already covered Zeppelin, but in terms of Black Sabbath, yeah, in terms of Black Sabbath, I was a fan of theirs. There was some albums I wanted to get, but I knew I wanted to have one item that was probably one of my biggest purchases when I first started to collect music, and I guess around the time when I first got some disposable income in my teenager adult years. So it's actually one of the pride and joys of my collection. This one over here is called the Black Box. I don't think they make this anymore, and if you're to try to look on eBay, it's probably worth a fortune. But this is the first 8 albums that Black Sabbath ever recorded with the original lineup. In case you don't know what the original lineup is, it's basically the Ozzy Osbourne era of it. So the first 4 albums that are very sludgy, doomy, like basically created heavy metal are on here, along with some experimental stuff in the last 4 albums. I dig it, but I know it's not for everyone here. Plenty of classics. And, well, let me open this up. You actually have some lyrics for the first time on a lot of this, in a nice, classy, velvet-covered book. Unbelievable. Oh boy. So, yeah, good old Ozzy Osbourne. Hard to believe, this was him in his 20s. If you only know Ozzy for one thing these days, it's probably, well, Ozzy and all of his excesses that caught up with him, or as the bumbling father on the Osbournes reality show. That wasn't always what he was like. He used to be part of a badass heavy metal band. Cool stuff. Oh yeah, there's also another Black Sabbath box I got too. Just in case you think Black Sabbath died after Ozzy had left the group, the truth is they actually flourished a little bit, or maybe not flourished, but they survived. Kind of staggered, then made a comeback. I've got another one of these boxes. This one is from the Ronnie James Dio years. This is when they got a little bit more melodic and a bit more, I guess, fantasy-based. But there's some vocal stuff that they've done on here that Ozzy would not have been capable of. Good stuff. Which leads me to another one of those weird collectible things. It's safe to say that whenever I was buying some of these CDs, unless it's like a collector's edition or a special edition, I always try to look for the best deal for that. Because I didn't like to overpay for things. If anyone wants to know, like, what's the most expensive album I ever bought? Well, I think it costs like a good $50 for one CD. And yeah, you're probably looking at me thinking like, how did you spend so much money? Truth be told, it's not exactly an easy one to come by. And I'm not talking about one of those Japanese imports that you find. Yeah, well, first I'll get into this. There's a lot of albums that were released in Japan also, which had maybe a Japanese exclusive bonus track to try to make it a bit more enticing for people to buy over there. So sometimes he had some rarities that you couldn't find anywhere else. Yeah, that actually was a thing. But in terms of the album that I have, let's look at this. It's related to Black Sabbath, but something else that's pretty neat. Bill Ward, the drummer of the band, actually had a solo album in 1990. And pretty good stuff here. Like, imagine like 80s rock, maybe with some Pink Floyd-ish keyboards. And of course, you got Ozzy singing on 2 songs. And I think 1 or 2 songs, you got songs sung by Jack Bruce. That name probably wouldn't tell you much, but Jack Bruce was one of the members of Cream in the 60s. The same band that Eric Clapton had got one of his starts. Yeah, good bassist and a good vocalist. Think the song Sunshine of Your Love? That's the guy. Yep, thank me for that later. Oh, oops. And since I'm on the subject of very heavy music, what's one of the heaviest albums I also have? Well, I'll be honest, I'm kind of a fan of some death metal sometimes. That kind of vocal style is not for everybody. Like, you're probably growling, sound like you're, I guess, getting sick on the mic. That's one expression I've heard before that kind of made me chuckle. But sometimes it works, like with this one here. This is like a bit more of a newer one for my taste, but Amon Amarth, Twilight of the Thunder Gods. Yeah, just in case you don't know, Amon Amarth, basically it's a band that seemed like they made their whole career off of singing on Viking mythology. The growls over here actually fit the song, because it almost sounds like a bunch of Vikings that are waging war. Or maybe they're about to tackle a dragon, or, I don't know, battle Loki. Or maybe they're joining with the Avengers and starring the... Seems like I could get too much into Marvel with this thing, but yeah, that's one of the heavier stuff that I have. Sometimes the growls are not for everyone, but truth be told, a lot of things, you don't have to be the best vocalist to be a fan, or at least you don't have to be the best vocalist to be successful. I mean, look at Bob Dylan. Seriously, where are you? Like, come on. Bob Dylan bringing it all back home. You're not going to be listening to him because of his amazing vocals. The guy speaks singings at best. You're listening for his poetry, for his lyrics, how he's probably telling people to fuck off without realizing he's telling them to fuck off. Yeah. Just in case you're wondering what I'm talking about, listen to the song Positively 4th Street. You'll thank me later. That's like a put-down song. If ever I heard a put-down song before. Oh. You know what? This gave me another idea. Bob Dylan leads me to this other supergroup that I've probably referenced in the past. Here. If you've never heard of the Traveling Wilburys before, I suggest you highly check it out. Like, if ever you find it, grab it if you like some old school rock. It may not be obvious, but it does lead to Bob Dylan. Because this group consisted of Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne. Jeff Lynne is a singer, main architect of the band Electric Light Orchestra. You know, Evil Woman, Don't Bring Me Down. That's them. So yeah, Jeff Lynne and Roy Orbison. So you basically have 3 generations of rock. Basically a bunch of friends getting together to jam and put out one of the killer albums of the 80s. Not a bad legacy they left behind. But especially since this was one of those albums that Roy Orbison put together before he passed away in the 80s. What a way to go out. You're going to notice that a lot of the bands I've been highlighting are probably British or from somewhere in Europe. If you want to know, like, are there any good Montreal bands out there? Well, yeah, there are. If you're looking at more modern rock, you're probably looking at Arcade Fire, and you're going to think them immediately. But there's also some other good ones. One of my favorite ones from the 80s, which you would probably know as a one-hit wonder, are Men Without Hats. Yeah, this is the album of theirs, Rhythm of Youth, that the Safety Dance came from. You know, we can dance if we want to. That's the one. But it's like early days of synth pop. Some pretty good stuff here, things you could dance to. It's not on this album, but one of these days, if you ever look up the song Where Do the Boys Go, it does have a pretty weird, almost disturbing look. Imagine a guy who's running around in circles right in front of the orange julep stand that's on the carry, and he's starting to be surrounded by a bunch of guys dressed up as Bonhomme Carnival. And you think, God, this sounds like it's the start of a horror movie. Actually, Killer Snowman. Why hasn't anyone come up with that for a movie? It's like easy stuff. And I guess one of the other fun things about discovering music is, if you're like me, you kind of like to know sometimes which musicians are playing in the band, who's producing them, and what other connections that they had in the past. And I guess Exhibit A for that would be David Bowie for me. Because I don't think I've really highlighted, but David Bowie is definitely one of my top 5 of all time favorites. Just because the guy had so many different styles. Like singer-songwriter, he's done his glam rock style in the 70s, moved on to the plastic soul era of Young Americans, to his Berlin trilogy. Yeah. The album Heroes, that's a song, We Can Be Heroes Just for One Day. Just, this album alone is the reason I want to be able to visit Berlin one of these days to experience that. Yeah, it was like one of those guys that you listen, or you pick out an album and you think, what direction is he going to go to now? So it was like one of those musical chameleons, kind of in a way like Madonna was like in her earlier years. Yeah, I know, Madonna, David Bowie, not exactly the same thing, but bear with me, it's kind of similar. But moving along, I would do something like, okay, David Bowie is on this, but then I look at the credits, I see, Robert Fripp played on this. Robert Fripp, guitarist of the band King Crimson, and I think, I'm gonna pick up their very first album. Yeah, if you don't know what this band is like, this face says it all. It's not for everybody. But then I would look and think, okay, he played in this band, but he was also with the band Van de Graaff Generator, which I got over here. And I happened to find this randomly in a record store in Florence a couple of years ago. Another one that's like the dark side of progressive rock. Just imagine, musically you got one keyboard player who seems like he's playing it more like a church organ than keyboards of the time. A guy that manipulated saxophones, so he's playing 2 saxophones at the same time. And the singer sounds like he should be delivering some Shakespeare in some dingy dinner theater without hiding his accent at all. Not for everyone, but if you like the weird and the ugly, sometimes that could be for you. Moving back to Bowie, I look and think, Bowie also produced the first 2 Iggy Pop albums. Lo and behold, I actually picked them up over here too. He got kind of like the proto version of a Bowie's Berlin era. You got The Idiot. And if you like the song China Girl by Bowie, the original version comes from this. It's not very danceable though, it's a bit more keyboard heavy and very lo-fi. And of course, Lust for Life. Yeah, because who isn't lustful for life? Yeah, classic stuff. And then, what else was there? Thought, oh yeah, Bowie also worked with some Lou Reed. You know. And then I have to pick up Transformer after hearing it. Take a walk on the wild side indeed. Then, moving along to the Robert Fripp connection too for King Crimson, I look, wait, hold on a minute. He worked with Daryl Hall of all people. What? Daryl Hall, really? Yep. The very same Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates. Same guys who sang Private Eyes, Maneater, I Can't Go For That. He actually had a solo album done in the late 70s. Sacred Songs. Very proggy, very out there, but still kind of Daryl Hall-ish. And to think that the record label did not want to release it, he said it would damage his commercial appeal. Little did they know, but then it created enough of a demand with people who did want to hear it. I'm one of them too. Yeah, that's the kind of the interesting part for me for music is seeing that whole tree, like who worked with what led to where, and blah 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 blah. Especially the blah 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 blah. That's always key. Yeah, I know I talked a lot about classic rock, old school metal, modern metal, but another one of my favorite kind of genres is funk. Well, I guess I could highlight the Minnesota sound of funk. there's one artist that you're probably going to know for that too, and that's without a doubt going to be Prince. Yep, Prince. Same guy that did that Batman soundtrack and did those songs that Jack Nicholson was parading around to in the '89 movie. But come on. When Doves Fly, When Doves Cry, Purple Rain, Let's Go Crazy, all classics. Hard to believe too that that guy was a really talented musician. And I'm gonna admit, he's one of those guys I kind of wish I got to see live, but sadly he was one of those that passed away a while back. Damn shame. There's nobody else like him. But I guess that is kind of true for a number of reasons, because come on, how many people are going to be going around and looking at this and think, yeah, I want to be like him. I want to be parading around on stage in a Speedo, trench coat, fishnet stockings, and stilettos. Yeah, the guy really, well, he did what he did and didn't care. And you kind of have to respect that. And yeah, just in case you think that's too sexy on one spectrum, don't worry, I have another element of sexiness around here. The group Roxy Music. There was one album of theirs too that, yeah, you make your own judgment on that. Actually, that one was not released in the US at the time it was originally coming out, like 1974, because they thought it was too hot for the record shelves. So they had done something completely different. Yeah, a bit of everything. And Moving Pictures. That's like a good double entendre when you look at this album cover. Or actually even a triple entendre. Because, you know, moving pictures, it could mean like someone's looking at a painting, it moves into tears because they're so emotional about it. Or when you look at the back side of the album cover, it's basically recording a video of this. Hence, moving picture. Yeah, very cheesy joke. But I had to highlight some Rush, because I wouldn't be doing myself justice if I didn't highlight one of the best bands that come out of Toronto. And depending on who I'm talking to, I probably lost a couple of brownie points for that, because some people was like, oh, you're a Rush fan? Get the fuck out of here. Come on. There's nothing wrong with them. I admit, Geddy Lee's vocals are definitely not for everybody, because they could be a little bit high-pitched, but musically, nobody's going to complain about them. They're all talented musicians. And just to get this out of the way, let's just say Pearl Jam 10. The very first Pearl Jam record. Because I think I'm under the impression I have one guy who's probably going to give me some crap if I don't show off any Pearl Jam. I can't really say that I listen to them much. I just own it. I have to give them a spin one of these days. But I do have it, so whoever you are, get off my back. Quite frankly, I'm a bit more of a fan of the other side of the, post the 90s grunge scene. Like, if you'd ask for the big four grunge bands in the 90s, you'd probably think Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, and Soundgarden. Truth be told, I would probably take Soundgarden and Alice in Chains any day. Mostly because that's a sound that I think I identify with a lot more. Alice in Chains. Dirt. So they're kind of the same kind of heavy. Very drudgy, sludgy sound, but also very layered. Especially in the backing vocals, too, between Lane Staley or... Wait, how do you say his name again? Ugh, taking myself to school here. Oh boy. Yeah, you people that download everything off of YouTube or you go on Spotify, I'm sure that liner notes are a foreign object to you these days. Yeah, I don't have time to look for it, but Lane and Jerry Cantrell, the backing vocals between the two, that really made the difference. And Soundgarden. I think I have to say I love their sound. No, not Ultra Mega OK, but if you're thinking classic, you would probably think Bad Motorfinger with the song Jesus Christ Pose. Hey, Chris Cornell, he was one hell of a singer, one hell of a wailer. You can't take that away from anyone. And I guess you could say I'm also hungry like the wolf. Yeah, I already had supper, so I'm not too hungry, but it's a good lead into one of the next ones I want to highlight. You already know that song from the band Duran Duran. Yeah, if you're like me, or at least some impressions before, you would think, Duran Duran, bunch of pretty boys that sang almost like the Backstreet Boys are NSYNC. And they have their place in music too, but truth be told, Duran Duran is not exactly like that at all. Like, they're actually their own rock band, they play their own instruments, they wrote their own music, and they're also pretty artsy too. They did take a lot of influence from the early glam and even Roxy music, if you want to make a callback to the sexy album photos I had before, so that was their style. You could dance to it, but there was always something going on musically that would catch your eye, like, huh, this isn't bad at all, you know? Not too bad. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking to myself, I went through a lot of material just now, and I've only covered a fraction of my musical collection, so I'm thinking maybe I should hold off for now. And this would give me a good incentive to do maybe a second part of this episode, where I could show off a lot more of my music, or maybe if there's any requests. Hint, hint. Yeah, so if you have anything else that you want me to cover on this in the Wanayuki Cheese Cafe one day, just, there's a comment section below that you can send your request to, and we could go from there. Whew, getting all kind of dry. Need some water soon. So on that note, this was another edition of the Wanayuki Cheese Cafe. So thanks for watching. If you like what you see, like I said, there's a comment section below, but just be sure to hit that subscribe button. Give me this video a thumbs up if you like what you see, and above all else, keep spreading my bad joke. I'll see you all next time. When was the last time I dusted on this thing?